If you think you've got a tough day at work today, or whatever might lie ahead of you, spare a thought for the chairman of the Conservative Party, who's been put out on the media round in the aftermath of those two disastrous defeats. I remind you, 2 5-digit majorities overturned, and some of the worst figures for a sitting government going back 40 or 50 years. So we welcome to the conversation Conservative MP and chairman of the Conservative Party, Richard Holden. Mr. Chairman, what excuse are you going to offer first? Governments lose by-elections, or it was a low turnout? Morning.
Good morning, Nick. So thank you for that introduction. I think that both of those things.
Well, I've got a bet with
true.
my producer, so which one are you going to put out first?
I'm going to go for both of them. No more betting, Nick, I think, on this. Is exactly where we need to be. There's no point in beating around the bush. These are not good results, but as you say, both very low turnouts, and sitting governments don't generally perform well in the by-elections.
Yeah, but the voters have seen through this now, haven't they, Chairman?
Seen through what, sorry, Nick?
Seen through those sort of arguments, because this is the latest in a series of by-election defeats for the Conservative Party. For whatever reason, you seem unable to get vast majority of possibly your supporters off their sofas. Why do you imagine that might be?
Well, look, I think we're facing let's look at the circumstances in which both these by-elections happened for a start. None of them, neither ideal. One, a sitting MP decided to stand down, within a year of a general election. Secondly, obviously in Wellingborough, we saw those issues around Mr. Bone and the recall petition. There, neither exactly ideal circumstances for a government entering a by-election. And as you said, turnouts hugely down. Well into the 30%, and very clearly within both of those by-elections, it was Conservative voters who decided to stay at home.
All right, you've referenced one of them, Wellingborough. What level of support did your candidate, Helen Harrison, enjoy from Conservative Central Command?
I was up there 4 times over the last few weeks, and we've had a team on the ground helping her out, over the last few weeks as well for the by-election campaign. Similarly, in Kingswood, I did 4 visits there as well, and we've had a team helping out there as well. But these are by-elections, much lower turnouts, so very, very difficult circumstances.
Did the Prime Minister fully back Helen Harrison, your Wellingborough candidate?
I think the Prime Minister backs all of the candidates that we put forward. So it's quite clear, though, that in these...
He didn't go, though, did he?
No, he didn't. But in both of these situations, difficult circumstances in both of the by-elections, and the Prime Minister's concentrating on getting that plan that we've put forwards together on those issues around inflation. Very difficult for people across the country at the moment.
There is a general election at some point this year. That much we do know, Mr. Chairman. And the candidate to whom I refer again, Ms. Harrison, says she will want to stand again in Wellingborough. Will you support that?
Well, that'll be up to the people of the Wellingborough Conservative Association, just like it was when they selected her for the by-election as well. We'll have to see what they decide. I don't want to preempt the judgments of any of my local associations right across the country.
As we're talking about local associations, you are the party chair, you're effectively running the campaign, but unless I'm aware, we don't know where you'll be standing in the general election. Is that correct, Chairman?
At the moment, I've not got a seat, yes, because my seat of North West Durham is being abolished, and the boundary changes actually very similarly to the way that Kingswood, which was up for the election this time, is also being abolished when it comes to the general election and split off to other parts of that Gloucestershire, Bristol area.
So what are you going to do? You won't be standing anywhere?
I've not decided yet, and obviously if I do go for selection anywhere, that will be very much down to the local associations as to whether or not they decide to choose.
So just to clarify, you are the Conservative Party chairman, and you've said if you go for selection at the upcoming general election. So even the chairman might desert the ship.
Well, I'm certainly not deserting anyone.
If you don't want to stand as an MP, how else am I to characterise that?
No, I'm campaigning for. Well, it's not. In the end of the day, it's not my choice as to whether the local associations will select me. We shall have to see on that front whether or not they do.
Well, will you be actively seeking a seat, seeking a candidature somewhere?
Well, I'm hoping to, yes, over the next few months. But we'll have to see whether or not anybody wants me, Nick.
But that's not the question, is it? What I thought I might hear is, yes, I'm absolutely determined to represent the Conservative Party, and I'm in active conversation, Nick. I can't tell you the areas, obviously, but there are 2 or 3 or 4 areas that I've targeted. It will be down to the good voters, of course, the Conservatives of Upper Whoop Whoop. Yeah. But I want to be part of the next government. That's what I was hoping to hear, and I hear from the chairman. Well, if and I hope. And maybe,
we'll have to see.
Chairman.
We'll have to see if there's any vacancies and people decide to stand down or retire. But I'm hopeful that I will get selected somewhere. Let's just leave it.
Well, there's another way of looking at this. Of course, the Deputy MP Oliver Dowden was party chair in June 2022. He quit after a series of by-election defeats. You could go that way and just stand down now and spare the agony.
Well, I think in fairness to Oliver, he does remain a Conservative MP. In fact, I think he's the Deputy Prime Minister at the moment. But
yes, he is.
I'm not gunning for. I'm not
gunning
for that
stepping
job,
down as chairman.
I'm very happy with the role that I'm in. I will be fighting for every vote at the next general election. I want to see as many Conservative MPs returned as possible, and the reason for that is because genuinely, when I look at the difference between us and the Labour Party, we've got that clear priorities that we've set out. Obviously, inflation has been the number one over the last few months, and we've made some real progress there. We've still got further to go, down to 4% on inflation. We want to go to 2%, obviously,
yes.
And then we can hopefully see some interest rate reductions. We've started with some of those tax cuts. We've seen that tax cut 2% off national insurance at the start of the year. Obviously, I want to go further, but we can only do that in a sustainable way when we've got inflation down. And I look at the other side, right, and I see the Labour Party, no plan at all, not interested in the future of the country. And when you look at it, it's fully back to square one. We're not just with the country and their policies, but actually when it comes to even that anti-Semitism issue within the Labour Party, we've seen rear its head again after
When you say square one, do you mean where we were 14 years ago? Is that what you mean?
Exactly. When the country was borrowing,
when hospital waiting lists were a third of what they are now.
When we
weren't in recession.
We
didn't have the number of people crossing the channel. I just want to make sure that when you want to go back to square one, for my listeners, now I'm sorry to talk over you, you want to go back to a third of where we were with hospital waiting lists, not the same number of people crossing, and we weren't in recession. I think a lot of people would vote for that.
Let me pick you up on some of those points, Nick. Actually, we saw those lorries crossing the channel back in the day. You remember that? Those awful situations where we had migrants dying in the back of trucks, just like we've got people dying in the channel today. Yes, of course we want to do more and tackle that, and all we're seeing from the Labour Party is opposing us every time we try and tighten up those illegal migration rules. And back in 2010 as well, Nick, you will remember that the government was borrowing £1 in every 4 it was spending. Yes. Imagine a household which was spending $40,000 a year but only had $30,000 a year coming in. We had to deal with a really difficult inheritance from the last Labour government, right? Gordon Brown, the man who sold the gold, basically bankrupted the country and thought it was a joke to leave us a note at the end of the day saying, there's no money left. Right? We've had to take some difficult decisions. It's only because we took those decisions we were able to stand behind families during the pandemic and then with the energy price crisis. Now we want to see more of those tax cuts coming down the way, but we can only do that in a sustainable way.
We have a minute or so left together. Can you help my listeners, many of whom are your supporters, will be buying one of the 2 newspapers, the Daily Mail or the Daily Telegraph? One headline says, "Now be bold and go for tax cuts, Mr. Hunt." The other says, "Hunt to shelve the 2p income tax cut." Which one is correct, Chairman?
Well, what we've seen at the start of the year is the Chancellor go forwards with that 2% national insurance tax cut. That was only able to be done because we've got inflation down. We're moving that in a sustainable way. We've got to only cut taxes when we can do them sustainably. And I think when we see I can't prejudge the budget. You wouldn't expect me to. But what I would like to see is further moves in that direction, but only done in a sustainable way. Because the most important thing, and this is what I get in my own constituency at the moment when I speak to people, is they're most concerned, the biggest concern is around the cost of living and inflation. They want to see that come down. We've seen some big progress on that. We've seen food inflation. Obviously, we've actually seen deflation in food prices over the last month or two. And we've seen petrol prices come down at the pump. People will be able to see that as they're driving around as well. We've got to keep that sustainably down in order to deliver those tax cuts.
Finally, your final reflection on the votes, and thank you for our extended interview. One of the elephant in the room we've not addressed, Mr. Chairman, is the performance of the Reform Party. Now, they've got a bit of wind in their sails. They're pointing to considerable uptick. That's a major concern. Do you fear a lot of your voters have in fact defected to Reform? And if so, how do you win them back, Mr. Chairman?
Well, what I'd say on that is that I remember in the run-up to, in 2015 when we saw the by-elections in Clacton and in Rochester where the Reform's predecessor, UKIP, was getting over 50% of the vote in some cases in those elections. We're not seeing that at the moment. But Reform have made it very clear, and Richard Tice has made it very clear, that they want to cost the Conservatives as many seats as practically possible at the election. All that means is Keir Starmer in Downing Street. I don't think that anybody in this country who's voting for Reform wants to see Keir Starmer in number 10. So I'd say, look, when it comes to the election, it's going to be the Conservatives with our long-term plan or Labour with no plan for the future of the country, and it's going to be very much up to them who they want to see in, whether it's going to be Rishi Sunak, me and the Conservatives, or whether it's Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and all the issues that we've seen re-emerge over the last couple of weeks from them as well.
Grateful for our extended time together and interview. Thank you, Conservative MP, Chairman of the Conservative Party, Richard Holden.